I met some of my wife's friends, and I thought this guy was going to give me the rock, like, pound.
Oh,
And I stuck my hand out, and nothing happened. Now I can laugh at it because I've kind of built up a tolerance for just like understanding that does not equal who I am. I mean, if that happened years ago, like I would have been shattered for weeks.
yeah, right. And you replay it over and over in your head. And meanwhile, the guy that did that to you, he doesn't even probably even remember who you are.
And he may even feel like, oh, why didn't I give him the rock? I'm so stupid.
Oh, maybe
like,
true.
That could
maybe
be part of it.
The same thing.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff Callahan here, founder of Become More Compelling, and you're listening to Become More Compelling Radio, the podcast where I have conversations with social skills and charisma experts. I glean all the glorious information I can get from them, and I pass that information on to you on a silver platter. Today, I'm joined by my friend Dan Chang, founder of the Friend Formula. Dan has been featured in Inc., Lifehacker, Business Insider, Huffington Post, Introvert Spring, and of course, Become More Compelling. In this conversation, we talk about strategies to master small talk. Dan actually has an excellent 3-step framework for you to start using immediately that will skyrocket your success when it comes to those smaller conversations that you have throughout your day. We also talk about mindsets, some best practices there to set you up for success when it comes to having those conversations in the first place. One thing I love about Dan is the conversation and the frameworks and the mindsets that he gives. They're all very simple, very easy to use. What that means for you is you're going to be able to start using them immediately after you listen to this podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation. I know you're going to love it. As always, show notes are available at becomemorecompelling.com, also in the podcast description. Definitely check out the link in those show notes for Dan's 3-video mini course on how to master small talk, where he talks about how to get over nervousness when it comes to small talk and kind of that importance and impact piece of why should you even worry about small talk. This is a great conversation. I know you're going to love it. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Dan.
Hey, what's up, Jeff? How's it going? It's good to be here.
It's going well. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. And I'm really excited because I've taken a look at your blog and I love the advice that you have around just like very actionable tactics to improve your social skills. And it's just like, I love the approach that you have because it always seems super doable. Whenever I read one of your articles, I'm like, well, that's great because it's so simple. And I think, and I really feel like I could do that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. That's actually what I strive for, where it's like, I guess it's kind of embodied in the name, the Friend Formula. I really wanted to boil down all of this stuff that I was learning into really, really simple stuff, right? And it's like not just that mindset stuff and not just the actions, but like it all combined into really, really simple steps. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here too. And I hope that what I have to share with your listeners today is helpful.
I'll give my listeners just a little brief schedule for today. We're going to take you through the importance and impact of small talk. We're going to touch on a little bit about who is Dan. Also, mindsets to take into those interactions, just effective ways for people to prep before they become social. And then the framework for mastering small talk, which I'm super excited to talk to you about. And just to kick it off, like, what's your superhero story? Like, were you bit by a radioactive spider? Who is Dan? And how did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, I did get bit by a spider, and
Nice.
That spider was childhood awkwardness. And I don't know if that's really a superpower, but I think that's what allowed me to become who I am today, right? And so because I was a shy kid growing up, it was like something that I always had to learn about and deal with. And I think because of that, it made me stronger. Like just for me to speak up like a quote unquote normal person and learn how to function like in a classroom or at a party took a lot of work. And because of that, I thought about a lot of things that most people just take for granted. And I can break that stuff down and teach it to people in a different way. So yeah, so over the years, I kind of like just taken notes and read a lot and um, put it all together onto a site and into a course. And yeah, and that's where we are today.
Nice. And I'm curious, did you ever have like a moment in your past where you just felt like, okay, I've had enough with the way I was, and I want to become different? Was there a moment like
Mm,
that for you?
yeah, yeah. So it would be probably about 9 years ago when I started working. So, like I said, I was always a shy kid, but it was okay, right? Like when you're in middle school, high school, you can kind of get by just being quiet, and it's okay. It doesn't really matter. But once you start working and you're forced to talk to people every single day, and you have to give presentations and stuff, that's when it really, really starts to show your, your true colors. And for me, my true colors were the fact that I wasn't able to just chit chat with anybody. I wasn't able to get up in front of a group and talk without being nervous. So 9 years ago was when I fully committed myself to figuring this stuff out and learning how to stop feeling nervous, how to start making friends with people that I meet just randomly everywhere I go.
Yeah, that's it's funny when you say presentations because I'm just remembering you just brought back like a flood of
Yeah.
memories for me because I remember being in high school. I think I was a freshman and typical like I never particularly liked school. I love learning, but I never liked that formal aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
like school stuff. But I remember having this presentation in my English class, and I remember not preparing at all, which is typical me. And I was like, whatever, I'll just wing it. And I remember standing up in front of the class and just kind of BSing my way through it, and everyone could tell. And I thought I would be fine, but I remember it just feeling so awful. Because I remember the teacher was kind of even poking fun, like, you didn't prepare at all, did you? And I'm like, not really. And I just remember that feeling, and it felt like, a magnifying glass in the sun where there's just like that little bead of light, and it just felt very, very hot. Just, uh, it's funny how those small moments can really end up taking our lives in a completely different direction than they would have gone because that was probably one of the things that happened to me that set me on this path to improving my social skills.
Yeah, it's usually like this really, really powerful moment of either inspiration or pain, right? And for I think for us, it was kind of the moment of pain where we realized, you know what, this really sucks, and I can't continue like this.
Yeah, it's that moment of like I'm going to change and it's going to happen and nothing will stop me. So you've spent the last decade improving your social skills. What's a typical day like if you were to travel back in time like as yourself now? What do you think your previous self would notice about you now?
Hmm, man, killing it with the crazy questions, Jeff. It's
I try.
nice, man. You're like, whew, okay. What would the old me notice about the new me?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I've actually thought about this before where I thought, man, I wish I could just go back as who I am right now, because I feel like there's so much I've learned, right? And I'd have this crazy unfair advantage, and I'd be able to live my life so differently. But anyways, okay, so if I were to look at me now, I think probably the biggest thing that would shock me is the fact that this dude is getting up in front of groups and giving talks. Like I've actually given um, all like a lot of presentations at work in front of really, really high level executives. I've given sermons at church, which is crazy. And yeah, like I just would never believe that this kid would ever get up in front of these people and talk to them. And I would also never believe that I would start conversations with random people just on the train and just like make friends with all these different types of people. Yeah.
That's awesome. And just thinking about that piece of being able to start those conversations and feel okay with it because when you look at small talk, because I know that's something that you're very passionate about. Small talk is everywhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what, every person that you talk to, unless they're your best friend, and even then, before they were your best friend, guess what? You small talked with them. It's a crucial skill that I feel like sometimes people can either overlook or just totally discount and say, you know what? I'm not interested in small talk. Let's get to a real conversation. What is like, I kind of view it as like the warm up period before people start connecting on a deeper level. So I wonder if you could take us through some mindsets around small talk, maybe some mindsets that have been holding people back, but also is there any mindsets that you've cultivated that make you successful at small talk?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely agree with what you said. I think small talk is everywhere we go. You see it all the time. And actually, I'd say probably most conversations that you encounter on a daily basis will be mostly small talk, right? And so when I noticed that, when I noticed that all of my bosses and everybody was really good at it, I realized, there's something there, and there's a reason why people do it, and and small talk is important, despite what people think, despite people saying that it's superficial, it's stupid. The fact remains that it's going on every day all around us, and it's for a reason. And the way that I teach it to my students is that I tell them that, listen, small talk is mandatory, right? It's for humans. Small talk is the same thing as what dogs do when they smell each other's butts,
I like
right?
that.
And oh, thank you. And it's a interesting visual image, but yeah. So it's something that is part of. It's like embedded in our nature, and we need to use small talk because there's actually been research that shows that there's a need for us to talk about nothing, and that talking about nothing helps us to build bonds with other people. And so a lot of people sometimes they just want to jump right into the deep stuff, into the meaningful stuff, but it's like someone saying they want to learn how to dunk before they even know how to dribble, right? Like, you got to know how to carry a light small talk conversation with someone before you can ask them about their biggest fears and their hopes and dreams, right? And if I'm talking to someone and they don't even care about my weekend, or they don't even bother to engage me about talking about something silly like the weather, then how am I going to assume that they even care about my life and that they care about anything else?
Mm. That's a really good point. I almost think about it like the small talk is building trust because we
Mm.
we humans were our first like our first red flag is, can I trust this person? Can I not trust this person? And if they're willing to talk to you, if it's about the weather, if it's about the game last night, you're kind of signaling to the other person like, hey, I like you enough to be around you and talk about what is ultimately somewhat trivial stuff, and it's kind of building that relationship up where you can go deeper later if you want to.
Exactly. Yeah. I think trust definitely is the biggest element when you start talking to someone new, because in a few seconds they're going to size you up and figure out, is this person crazy or are they trying to hurt me, right? They need to figure out whether they're going to continue talking to you or not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just curious, like thinking about small talk and kind of being comfortable with it. Is there anything that you recommend to your students about just making yourself comfortable first before it even comes to small talk?
Yeah, for sure. So there's some things that we need to think about to prepare mentally, and I think there's I think the first thing that I would emphasize to people is that conversations are not just exchanging information, right? It's not just like two people talking about a certain topic, right? Most of the time we have conversations and we forget about what we even talked about, right? We forget about all that information
Mm.
because most conversations are purely for a social function, right? So what I want people to remember is that small talk and conversations, they're about bonding more than information, right? So it's bonding over information. And so the I first realized this when I was working, and I would sit in meetings, right, with like 10, 20 people. These would be creative meetings where everyone's like chiming in, pitching in their ideas and stuff. And I would never, ever speak up because I was really scared, right? I always tried to think of like a really clever thing to say, or like, and I would just be sitting there brewing in my own head and just sitting there in silence. And I actually had clients complain to my boss that I didn't speak, which is, and they're like, why are we paying for him to be here if he's not even saying anything? And it was, obviously a huge blow to me because it's not like I didn't want to. I just kept sitting there thinking and just nothing came out. And I think it's the same thing with people and with conversations. We try to, think about the information that we're going to say so much when it's really not about that. And I think this tip that my boss gave me at the time really helped me to change the way I see speaking up. And what she said to me was, she said, you don't have to have a great idea to say something. And that just blew my mind. I was like, wait, why? This whole time I've been trying to come up with something smart to say. I wanted to look smart. I want to sound smart. But what it actually ended up doing was sabotaging me. And I just ended up sitting there, right? So she told me, you don't have to, it doesn't even have to be your own idea. You can just agree with what someone else says or just repeat what someone else says. And they just want you to know that you're there and that you're active, right? So that you're part of this. And that would be my number one thing, bonding over information.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in because this is awesome. And I've been doing a lot of reading and research lately around persuasion. Like, how do you communicate your ideas in a way that persuades people? And one of the best things that I've kind of come across in my studies have been if you imagine like the two-dimensional world versus the three-dimensional world. Like for me, the 2D world is Sonic the Hedgehog, where the 3D world is Grand Theft Auto or whatever it might be. There's a huge difference because there's an entirely different dimension. When we let go of that perfect thing that we say, and we realize that conversations are not about exchanging information, it's more about that feeling, that vibe that's happening in the room, then you enter the three-dimensional world where you realize that it's a fairly safe space, because if you look back at previous conversations, you're not going to be able to tell me one specific sentence verbatim. If you've ever played a telephone game, this is true. But you do always remember the feeling. Like, I talked to Dan yesterday, and I just remember he was a really cool guy. Once you let go of the exact words that were said, then it really opens up the playing field where you can actually focus more on the vibe in the room and being able to communicate with someone, because that person, they may not need you to have the perfect thing. And I'm a very much a perfect preparer. Like, I like having everything just so, like you said it yourself when I hopped on Skype, like it was right at the appointed time. So I can channel that and I can use it for good. But I realize that in social interactions, when there's so much gray area, it's not good at all. It's gonna keep you internal, and it's going to make it where you're going to be a lot more hesitant to just get out there and play.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really good point of debate that I personally think I disagree with most people. So there's this thing with preparing, right? And a lot of advice out there tells you to prepare topics when you go out, right? So like have a list of different current events and some of your interests that you want to talk to people about. And this way you'll be ready for any conversation. And I personally think that, and I'd love to hear what you think too, but I think that's terrible advice, right, for social stuff, because like you said, it's highly unpredictable and you never know what's going to happen. And you can't just go into a conversation with a list of topics and try to go through your bullet list. You definitely can prepare, but going into a conversation where you're like trying to like talk about these prepared topics is usually comes off kind of weird.
Yeah. So
what are your thoughts?
This is awesome. So we're not going to disagree. Again, I'll tell you why. This is great. This is like raw stuff. The headline's going to be Jeff and Dan getting a fight. So My thoughts on it are, and if you look on my site right now, you will see some of that advice of preparing topics in my big guide with how to join and enjoy group conversations. But here's also what I think on that. Like, yes, it's okay to skim the news and just say like, hey, what's current right now? Is there like a new Flappy Bird game that everyone's obsessed about? What's Kanye West doing? Oh, he's still crazy. That's fine. I feel like that increases people's self-comfort to a point where they feel like they have a safety net. On that same guide, what you'll also see is conversations are like trains. There's always another one coming. So, and I 100% agree with you, Dan, that if you latch on to any particular topic and try to shoehorn it into the conversation, you'll lose every time. Completely, like, people will, they'll just be like, you know, he really wanted to talk about Kanye West. What's this guy's deal? And it
like,
won't,
yeah,
it won't feel authentic and it won't feel natural. I think there's a balance there. I think it's all about the intent that you have. You absolutely cannot win by trying to shoehorn something in a place that it doesn't go. We all learned this when we were trying to get the round peg into the square hole when we were like 2 years old. But at the same time, I feel like just doing a little bit of skimming and having something extremely loose can increase your comfort level so that you feel like if I just get stuck and I don't have anything, I can pull out like, hey, you know, I was reading an article before I headed out and it said Kanye's turned into a living embodiment of a rainbow. Or I'm just making this up. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I'll get your thoughts on it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you know, I agree. I think it's good to definitely be up to date on current events. And I like the way you put it, where you said you can think of it as a safety net, right? And I think we do agree that you don't want to drive into these topics and force them, but you can use them as a fallback plan. And if it gives you confidence going in, then by all means do it, right? And and a lot of times these people will start talking about current events, and so it'll be good that you know at least a little bit about them.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Yeah. Like on a personal note, like last November, I decided to unfollow everything on Facebook. So I'm like a blank slate. Like if you told me something right now about pop culture that I hadn't just skimmed, I wouldn't know about it. And what I've noticed, because I was just feeling for myself that I was getting too much input and not enough output for myself, I was like, you know what, let's shut down the engine. So I unfollowed everything from my wife to every person, every page.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So now all Facebook is for me is I'm in a couple of groups and I use it as glorified messenger and email, and that's it. But those trending stories, they get me. And I actually have to have a Chrome extension that blocks them, because if I'm trying to get some writing done, I can't trust myself.
Dude, that is impressive.
It's and necessary for me.
Yeah, well, it's good that you know yourself like that. And yeah, but I like Facebook to me is like my primary news source. Like, I don't know how that happened, but it's funny. Like, if I want to know what's going on in the world, I just scroll through my news feed, and I don't even read the news anymore. It's just like, it's all there for me, you know?
Which, it's funny, if there's ever a storm, like the only way I can get weather is through Twitter, and then I know to hide in the closet or whatever is happening. It's the 21st century. Segueing to, because we're talking about small talk, and you have a really good framework for mastering small talk. And I was wondering if you could school us in, like, say we have a podcast listener, they're going to go out tonight. They know that there are going to be some new people at this place, and they want to feel comfortable, and they want to be successful when it comes to small talk. Yeah,
so I have a basic framework that that consists of like 3 steps that I teach to my students, and and you can really just use these 3 steps over and over and over in every conversation, and it works really well, and it's really easy. But actually, before we get into that, I just want to go over one more mindset.
Yeah.
Before, if I could, and
Absolutely.
That would be too much self-focus. And I think we kind of covered this a little bit when we were talking about preparing topics and being stuck in your head too much. But I just wanted to talk about this a little bit more, because I think it's so important. And that's the fact that when we go into any conversation, many of us focus way too much on ourselves and what we're going to say and how people perceive us and how interesting we are. And that is just a mindset that I want to help people to overcome and tweak, right? So the reason that it's so dangerous is that when we focus on ourselves, it increases our anxiety and it increases our ability to retrieve negative thoughts. It creates this bias, right? And so when we're entering a conversation, I guess the first thing that you want to do to stop focusing on yourself is to, first of all, stop comparing yourself. And for me, this was a huge revelation that helped me to go from really shy to not so shy when I stopped looking at myself and seeing other people and just like comparing back and forth and just being stuck in my head. And then secondly, the next thing that I did was I started focusing on other people instead of myself. And this took me from not so shy to confident, right? Like once you get out of your head and stop living inside of your own head, then that's when you really paradoxically become self-confident, when you stop thinking about yourself. It's really, really weird, right? How that works.
I 100% agree. Something that I've, over the last few months, that I've been trying to focus on a lot is just, it's going to sound a little woo-woo. I'm not a woo-woo person at all. Even though I feel like I've had, if you've looked at my previous podcasts, every single one, I'm saying I'm not woo-woo. So maybe that means I'm protesting too much.
Yeah.
But I've been,
just embrace who you are, man.
Yeah. God, apparently, just get me a grass skirt or whatever it is that I need to have, a flute. I don't know. I've been focusing on just taking a little break throughout the day and breathing and trying to be mindful. I haven't perfected a meditation practice yet, but I'm moving in that path. And it's interesting because I've done a lot of research on kind of that concept of metacognition, thinking about thinking, and how our thoughts can literally, it's super unfair. Like humans have the great gift of being able to think about thinking, but if you're not careful, those stories that you tell yourself, they can pop up at any time. Like if you found yourself in a certain frame of mind, like say with social skills, you think about the time that, well, for me, it would be when I met some of my wife's friends and I thought this guy was going to give me the rock, like, pound. And like, I stuck my hand out and nothing happened. And it was super awkward. Now I can laugh at it because I've kind of built up a tolerance for just like understanding that thought does not equal who I am. And I mean, if that happened years ago, like I would have been shattered for weeks. But now it's just like, now it's a source of joy to me because I think it's really funny. But I would not be this way years ago, not by a long shot.
Yeah, right. And you replay it over and over in your head, and you're just like, and meanwhile, the guy that did that to you, he doesn't probably even remember who you are.
And he may even feel like, oh, why didn't I give him the rock? I'm so stupid.
Oh, maybe
like,
true.
That could
maybe
be part of it.
The same thing.
It's so funny because humans are not the most rational beings, so we kind of make up these movies in our heads of how our lives are turning out, because ultimately we need to be okay with it, but sometimes that can mean the movie is, you're not always the hero that gets everything right. Sometimes you're like the lovable loser that is, just messing everything up. So it's really important to pay attention to who are you in that movie? Who are you in that story that you're telling yourself? Is that true, number one? Because it probably is not. And number two, if you don't like it, how can you change it?
That's really good.
But I love that mindset. Yeah. I think less self-focus is always a good thing, because the more you're focused on your own internal thoughts and feelings, you're probably going to head in a direction that you don't want to be in.
Right. And you can't even trust your own thoughts. I've realized that, like you said, you have these invisible scripts that we kind of make up about ourselves. And we also have thoughts that come from our childhoods or things that our parents tell us, things that our friends tell us. And so every day we've got like hundreds and thousands of thoughts that just go through our minds. But which ones are true, which ones are not true, right? And so sometimes we skew towards the negative ones and just dwell on those when we really shouldn't be, because those are just lies that we're telling ourselves and that other people have told us.
I'll also include in the show notes a really good mindfulness meditation by Sam Harris in the show notes, and that's what I use. And there's a specific part, because it's a little bit lengthy, 24 minutes, but in the middle of it, he talks a lot about conjuring up a negative emotion and just realizing and looking at it and saying, like, this thought does not change who I am. And it's a really powerful way to impact, to kind of flip the script. And if we're thinking about our thoughts like a VCR, kind of pop in an old tape and hit the record button and maybe record something new. Instead of thinking like, oh, I'm such a screw up, maybe you record over that and you say like, this one time I thought I was a screw up, but maybe that's not true. So talk to me about the Mastering Small Talk framework. This is okay. I've been interested in this since we set this podcast up. Give me the goods. I want to know.
All right. Yeah, let's get to it. Enough dilly-dallying. Okay, so the basic framework consists of 3 steps, like I said, and the overall goal of this is to highlight similarity between you and the other person. I'm sure you've heard this before, but people like people that are like themselves. So the more you can highlight that, the better. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like have everything in common. You don't need to have the same interests. It's not like you only become friends with people that are just like you. But the thing is, we all have human fundamental things about us that are similar. And so we just want to, through our conversations, develop that and highlight them to the other person. All right. So, so step 1 is to move beyond cliches and facts into opinions and feelings. All right. So in every conversation, you're going to go through this phase, or these stages, I should say, where you start off with cliches, which are like, it's a nice day today, huh? Nice weather. And then you go into facts, which are things like, how's your day going? What'd you do this weekend? And then opinions, which is going to be things that people like, they don't like. And then finally feelings, which is, I'm really excited about this. I'm scared about this. And you want to move along that progression. And so step 1 is going to be to move past the facts, the cliches and stuff, and go into the opinions and feelings. Or in other words, from what to why, right? So you want to flip it. And what this does is this gets the other person sharing and talking about their likes and dislikes and preferences and feelings. And then you basically get them to self-disclose or talk about themselves. And this is going to make them feel really, really good. And step number 2 is then to affirm what they say, right? So as they're sharing about themselves, they're basically like opening their chest up and like bearing their soul, even if it's just something that doesn't seem that important. When someone says something, they're putting a piece of themselves into the world, right? And it's a moment of vulnerability. So you need to, in that moment, show them that you understand them and show them that you're listening to them, right? So this is a huge thing, I think. Really, a lot of people are really bad at, and something that I still am practicing to this day, which is affirming what they say. So when someone says something, you need to both verbally and physically show them that you hear them, right? So this can, just be like, it can be as simple as just saying, you're just like repeating what they say, nodding, using phrases like, oh yeah, totally, I understand, that's so interesting. And so when people talk, they don't want to just, it's the weirdest thing if you say something and then you look at the other person and they're just staring back at you with like a blank stare, right? And you're like, wait, dude, is this person are they even listening to me right now? Or what's going on?
Are they even alive?
Yeah, exactly, right? And so there's been many people that I've talked to where I'm like sharing and telling the story and they're just staring back at me with nothing, right? Just a stone face. And I literally feel this gut reaction where I just want to stop talking, right? I'm like, I need to.
Maybe you should just be like, hey, I run this website. You should really check this out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Hey, I think this could help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this could really help you.
Oh yeah. So step 2 is to affirm what they say, right? This is really, really important. And then step 3, you can't just like keep going and just nodding your head like, oh, yeah, 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 the whole time. Step 3 is you have to relate with your own opinions and feelings. So this is where the highlighting similarity comes, right? So basically, relating with your own opinions and feelings, it doesn't mean that you have to say like me too to everything that they say, because I think unless it's absolutely true, a lot of times people might like try to create this artificial bond that doesn't really exist. But when you relate to what they say, that just doing that helps you to build rapport with the other person, even if you don't 100% agree with what they're saying, right? So, for example, before, Jeff, we were just talking about our thoughts on preparing conversations, right? Like I shared my opinion on what I thought, and then you affirmed what I said. You're like, and then you shared your own opinions and feelings about it, right? So,
and at no point did it feel like we were disagreeing, because granted, we're probably fairly good at conversation. At least I hope so. And it just felt like, a natural, good conversation. And with step 3, what I'm also thinking about, and we'll see what your thoughts are on this, like, it seems like there are a few people out there, or a lot of people actually, that think that relating with their own story means it's a perfect opportunity to one up. What are some ways that, like, say you had a client and you could tell that because most people that one up, they probably don't know that they do it. What sort of advice would you give them to relate, but on kind of a lateral level, instead of saying like, oh yeah, well, this one time I rode 2 elephants, or whatever it might be?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, most people I'd say that I've encountered have a problem with sharing their own opinion. So I encourage them to speak up and to just say what's on their mind. But this is an interesting scenario where the person's actually a one-upper, and yeah, I don't know. I think with that, it's kind of a deep issue where there's probably some sort of insecurity there, where they feel like they need to be better than other people. This comes down to the comparing thing as well. They probably they definitely are comparing someone else's experiences with their own, and then trying to highlight how theirs is better. Right.
And
so
I just had a thought too. Is like, if you're actually doing step number 2, which is affirm what they say, and you really take that super seriously, then if you're a one upper, or even if you don't mean to be but you are, it's not going to feel quite that way, because you're just affirming what they say, and that other person feels taken care of, because they're like, oh well, he didn't just jump right in with something that he thinks is better. He actually took the time to agree with not necessarily agree, but just affirm that what I said is valid, and that I could tell he was actually listening to me, rather than just kind of that spring-loaded, like, I'm not listening to you. I'm just like a mousetrap that's spring-loaded, ready to start talking.
Yeah, that's a good point. See, like it's built right into the framework. You don't even have to worry about it.
Love it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. And you know what? It's funny because I have some people in my life that I know that they skip step 2, and it's really weird. Like, I'll be talking about, I don't know, like my baby or something, and they'll, right when I'm done, they'll just jump right in and start relating, right? And they'll say, oh my gosh, I was just gonna say that, right? And then or like, oh, that reminds me, right? And they just skip step 2, and then it's like I didn't even say what I said. It's just like what I said was just a springboard for them to talk about their own thing.
And I just want to call out how powerful step number 2 is, because now I'm thinking of like people that actually do step number 2. They are the exception. That so few people do this, that just by the nature of you taking that step and affirming what someone else says, and just sharing in that moment of, they've just shared something with you, letting them feel heard, doing that immediately sets you apart from probably 99% of people having conversations, because most people just don't do it. And how powerful is that? Yeah. How powerful is that skill when you're that exception doing that? You're immediately going to stand out. And it's something so simple that people can start doing today.
Definitely. Yeah. And when it comes to starting today and taking real action,
Ooh, yes, please.
definitely. I agree. You're right. That's one small thing you can do just to affirm people as you listen to them. And you'll notice it's crazy the way they open up and they talk more, and the quality of your conversations will just skyrocket. Other things you can do, just baby steps. I'd just encourage you, just one small change every day. If you just make like a 1% course correction on your flight plan, over time you'll be in a completely different destination, right? So
I love that metaphor. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're on a cross country flight and the captain changes 1% in Los Angeles, you're not going to end up in New York. God knows where you'll be. I'm not that good with directions, so I'm not going to guess. But it's going to be in a different location than if you change that 1%, like heading down to LaGuardia. Like it's going to be much different. So just doing those tiny correct courses can have massive results. Because every time you open your mouth with another human, guess what? You get a chance to practice.
Definitely. And and I'm sure you've learned through your, what is it? 80,000 conversations. By the way, how did you keep track of all that number? That just boggles my mind.
89,400. And to be honest, like I stopped counting a while back. So it's more. I started just tracking my conversations throughout a day. And I did that for a few months, and then I conservatively, because I was like, you know what, if I'm going to guess, I'm going to guess low. And so I extrapolated that number out over the last 10 years since I've been practicing, social skills and charisma, and that's the number I came out with. And then I probably was like, there's probably a margin for wrongness here, so I'm going to actually scale down. So I think I scaled down by probably about 2,000 or 3,000. So it's probably more, but I can't roll in and say 100,000. 89,400 sounds pretty believable, even though it's probably false because it's probably more than that.
It's probably, right. Yeah, give it a few more years and it's going to be ridiculous.
I'm just trying to get that 100,000 so I can be like 100,000. And really, like, and this speaks to the post I did on the friend formula. A lot of that's just based on that conversational muscle memory and saying, like, when you leave your house, just start tiny conversations throughout your day. And if you couple that with the what to why, affirm, and relate, like, you'd be unstoppable. You would actually have to probably plan for an exit strategy because people would latch onto you so much. Because you just have to be like, I have to go. It's been great talking to you, but I have to leave. You'd be like human Velcro. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of those tiny nudges to change behavior.
Definitely, yeah, and that's actually the tip I was going to give as well. It could be as simple as saying hi to as many people as possible during the day, and that really just gets the ball rolling.
If you start that in the morning at 6:00 when you're out at happy hour, like, guess what? It's going to be a whole different game than trying to move the entire boulder of I haven't started many conversations or any conversations throughout my day. Trying to do all that at once. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm a big fan of making success just simple and part of the system that you've created.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and I think just saying hi to people as much as possible, and what was our other thing? Affirming what people say. Yeah, going through these steps, like, you're going to kill it. It's really, really easy, and once you try it out, you're going to see it's really, really powerful stuff. And just listening to people and affirming and then relating, like, over and over. I mean, if you look at any conversation, that's really all it's based on, right? It's just the same framework over and over. So just knowing that helps you to have more powerful conversations. And it also takes pressure off yourself because now you know how a normal conversation is supposed to function. So if it goes poorly, you know that for example, the other person is just not good at conversations and it's not your fault. So you also stop blaming yourself all the time because you can see, you know what, that other person was really, really terrible at affirming what I say. They were also really terrible at relating with their own opinions. And it was just me trying 100%. And so it's not my fault. right? The other person was just bad at conversation. So
it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
I love that. So if you're cool with it, I'm going to throw a couple rapid fire questions your way.
Okay, go for it.
All right. If you could send a text message to everyone on Earth, what would it say?
I see you.
Ooh, that's frightening. I'm a big fan of the Jason Bourne movies, and my favorite part of each movie is when he's in some situation and he's looking at someone and he's on the phone with them and he's like, she's right next to you. And it's just like, oh, and then the music starts.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
And so that's what you would do. I like that.
Yeah, I would just creep out the whole world in one shot.
Creepy. And then you could turn on the news or scroll through your Facebook feed and see like, I just received the weirdest text message, and then it would become a national phenomenon. And then hopefully you're using a burner phone, so you wouldn't have to deal with the fallout. Yeah.
No one would ever know.
No one would ever know. So let me ask you this. If you woke up tomorrow with no connections, no friends, but you still have all of your current knowledge, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Dude, I love these questions, by the way. They're so good. Honestly, I would use, and I'm not just saying this to like promote my own stuff, but I would honestly just go out and start using this 3-step framework with everybody that I see. And just start talking to random people. Because I have found that when I do this, and what I do is during my commute every day to work, I talk to as many people as possible using this, and I've made a ton of friends, and I've gotten so many numbers. I've actually been invited over people's houses for brunch, and like, and actually someone that I know, like he or someone that I met, he owns a company, and someone left, and he was looking for someone to fill that position. So if I was looking for a job, I could have actually like maybe talked to him, see if I'd be a good candidate. And so just meeting as many people as possible everywhere you go really opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, and it's funny because people that maybe would maybe self-describe as, I'm not the kind of person that could do this, or I'm not the kind of person that would start conversations with people on the train. Like once you start doing it, a whole different world opens up to you. It's something that you never would have seen if you hadn't tried it, because it's right there. It's right under your nose, and you wouldn't know it exists unless you actually try it and do it. Yeah.
And if I could just address that, I'm not the type of person.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Listen, I'm not the type of person to be on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I'm not the type of person to be teaching people. I never saw myself to be any of these things. I never thought that I would stand up in front of people and teach and talk. But we're all a process, right? Like, who you are right now is not who you're going to be 5 or 10 years from now. You don't even know who you're going to be. And so like when it comes to this conversation stuff, it's also a growth process. And just the fact that you feel nervous about it today doesn't mean that in a year or two you're not going to feel differently. And there's nothing that I would encourage you to invest in yourself more than social skills, because this stuff is going to take your life to the next level, like in your friendships, in your career, relationship stuff. Like, it's so important. And this is stuff that they don't teach in schools. They don't put it in textbooks. This is stuff you have to figure out yourself. So why not, start practicing now and learn from some people that struggled with it themselves.
Yeah. And I just want to call out, I love that because it's harnessing the growth mindset. And whether we like it or not, no one is fixed. Like, you're going to change. It's up to you what kind of influence you want to have on that. If it's growth in a purposeful direction, or if it's just kind of like a leaf blowing in the wind, you might end up in the same spot, but you're going to go places. So you might as well go to the right places, or the places that you decide that you want to go.
So good. Dude, I really like that leaf thing.
I just made it up, so hopefully it made sense.
It made a lot of sense. I really like the visual images that you come up with. I got to try to do that a little bit more.
Well, actually, it's funny because we all pick up things from things that we've done recently. Prepping for this podcast, I sat outside yesterday and watched the leaves fall. That subconsciously just embedded itself in my mind.
All right. Wow. There we go. Nature was giving you a hand and helping you out.
That's right. I want to talk about an awesome resource that you have for listeners of this podcast, and it sounds like it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be a great way to kind of get that diving board and launch into improving some things. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a free mini course available on my site, thefriendformula.com. You can just go on there right now, sign up. You got free access to the videos and basically it'll go over the fundamentals of small talk, how to, understand it differently, how to uncover the power of it. And then also in video number 2, you'll learn how to stop boredom and blanking out. I think that's a big problem with many people where you're like, I don't even want to be talking about this. This is so boring. And then you just start zoning out and your mind goes elsewhere. So how do we stop that from happening? And then number 3, nervousness, which is huge, right? How do I stop feeling nervous around people? What's like the core fundamental issue in my psyche and how do I overcome that? And so you can go onto thefriendformula.com, sign up now. You can also stay in touch with me on Facebook, just facebook.com/thefriendformula. That's where I post all my updates. I put some silly videos. I put some inspirational stuff. And you can also email me anytime if you have any questions you want to talk, dan@thefriendformula.com. And yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/ I think it's friend formula. No, without the.
And I'll actually do you one better. I'll link to that freebie, which sounds like it'll be a powerful resource to just take what we've been talking about in this podcast. And I'm thinking of Hot Wheels and like how you would take the car and you would tick it backwards and it go tick 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 tick.
Oh yeah,
that's what this is going to do for you. And I'll link to that in the show notes, and I'll also you'll find contact information for Dan in the show notes and the podcast description as well. So no fear, I got you covered.
Awesome, good stuff, man.
Awesome. Well, Dan, it has been a pleasure, sir. It's been a great conversation. We'll absolutely have to do it again at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoyed this. So yeah, hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan.
No problem.